Hey guys, it's Ryan again. Today we are going to be discussing layers within Adobe Illustrator Creative Cloud, and again I'm using the 2015 version, but most of this has been around for quite a while, and you'll notice if you see anything different from your version if you're using a different version of Adobe Illustrator. So first things first, I have my layer panel open, and that's over here. And you can find it by going to Window and coming down to Layers, or simply pressing F7 on your keyboard. But again, I already have that open, so I don't need to do that. Before we talk about layers, let's quickly review some things we talked about last week with groups and arranging. So, for example, I have a stack here of colored rectangles and another stack of colored ellipses, and if you look at the layers panel, you can see what we're going to do. So I'm going to open up by twirling this little triangle here, twirl that open, and you can see the order back to front, top to bottom of the rectangles. So if I click on this reddish kind of a fuchsia colored rectangle, you can't see which one is selected unless you look right down here. There's this little circle or square thing that's colored, and you can see that that is what is selected. If I instead chose this yellow one, you see that moved, that square moved to this rectangle. If I click the green one, it goes to that one, the blue one, and so forth. So again, we have the fuchsia colored one here. I'm going to move it forward step by step, just using Control or Command and the forward bracket, the right side bracket icon, and that's just with my keyboard holding down Command and or Control and that right side bracket. So once, twice, 3 times, and now you see, as you look on the layers, that fuchsia colored rectangle is selected and it's in the front. So it's on top of the stack. So we can just think of it that way. The front is the top, the back is the bottom, and that is how you can see where that selection is. So again, we can move from the front all the way to the back, Command Shift left bracket or Control Shift left bracket, and that'll move that all the way to the bottom of the stack on your layers panel. And you can see what each object is. It says a rectangle, 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 etc. So that again is the basics of arranging front to back. Remember also, if you group 2 things, for example this yellow and this fuchsia colored rectangles, we'll do Command G on a Mac, Control G on a PC. It promotes the all of the objects in the group to be with that group, the frontmost object in the group. So in this case, the yellow rectangle now has the fuchsia colored rectangle grouped with it on that same layer. And now while it's grouped, you'll see something different on your layers panel over here. You'll see that you're on layer 1, but then the group has its own set of layers within it effectively. So let's say we move from the rear of the group to the front, and you can see that moved it. You know, remember the top is the front, the bottom is the rear, and we can maneuver, or we can change things within that. Let's say instead of using the layers panel to do that, we click on the group itself, double click into it to go into isolation mode. We can also move it to the front, and you'll see within isolation mode on your layers panel here, it shows the group and then those 2 objects within, And as you just saw, I moved that from the bottom to the top, moved it forward. However you want to think about it, it is excuse me, the same either way. And then again, to exit isolation mode, we just double click outside of that. So now you see that I still have the group. I can still work with the group in any way that I'd like, but I can just, it's just another way to show on the layers panel rather than, you know, trying to remember which one was in the front and which one was in the back. And that's especially useful for a group such as this one. If, for example, these two items are next to each other, they're not overlapping, but they are still within the group. Now you can tell which one is in the front just by looking at the layers on the layers panel. And that again is just twirling down the group within the layers panel here, so you can see that the red, the fuchsia colored one, is in front of the yellow one. And now one thing you may be wondering as you look at that group on the layers panel is ungrouping, and we discussed that with our previous lesson. So how do you ungroup? Well, again, you can either click the group, single click with the selection tool, Command Shift G to ungroup, or Control Shift G on your PC, and you'll see that that has ungrouped the two items. I'm going to group them back together again to show you something else. And I can just click the rectangle here, which is the red rectangle, or the fuchsia colored rectangle within the group, and I'll just drag it outside of the group. And now it's removed from that group selection. You can remove both or however many you would like. Again, if you take all of them, let me show you that again. I'll group it back together. If you take both or all of the objects that are within a group and move them outside of that group, then of course it breaks the group apart. And I've moved them behind this this green one, and I don't want that. And you can see that all I need to do to change the order is just drag these around, and now I have it back to the order that I started with that fuchsia colored one in behind the other ones. Okay, so again, that's a quick review of grouping, but then adding with it the layers panel ordering and things like that. Now the other things that you can do with the layers panel, and I'll show you those here. First, you can see that we have a layer, and we can twirl that open and close to see the artwork, the objects on each layer. We can make or release a clipping mask on that layer. We can create a sub-layer, and I'll show you what that was. Let's twirl it back open, create a sub-layer. Here I have a sub-layer within that layer. I can put whatever I want. I can change the order of that sub-layer. So let's put it between the green and the yellow rectangles, and let's grab a star tool, and we'll make it the default colors by hitting D on our keyboard. Excuse me, I didn't want to do that. I need to deselect my my rectangle there. So we'll make a star right there. We'll turn it into the default colors, and we'll put that path, and we'll just drag it onto that layer right there. Remember that when you're in the drawing mode, normal drawing mode, if you do not have an object selected on a main layer, let me show you that again. So I have the layer selected, and I don't have an object selected to draw in front of. It's going to draw it in front of everything. And so that's how I knew that this was the path that I create. and I can drag that down to layer 3, which is a sub-layer within layer 1. So we can move those around. We can do those kinds of things, the same things that we can do with the objects, but it's just a different way of sorting those. And I'm going to delete both of those, and it asks, because I have artwork on that layer, I have 2 objects, these 2 stars. Do you want to delete this layer? Yes, I do. And now it's gone, they're both gone, and we're back where we started. So the other thing that you can do, that was a sub-layer, and so that puts the layer within the layer that you currently have selected. You can create a new layer, and when you create a new layer, it puts it on top of the layer that you're working with. Let me delete that, and we'll change our drawing mode to draw behind, and put new layer. It put it behind or below that previous layer that I had selected. So keep in mind, your drawing mode will influence the order of your objects as you build them on layers, and it will also influence the order of your layers as you add new layers. So example, I'm right here on top of, or what appears to be in front of this blue rectangle, but I'm in draw behind mode, and so when I put my star, it's behind everything because I'm on this layer below. Now let me go again to draw normal, which means draw in front of or draw on top of, and I'll deselect this and I'll get a different color. Actually, let's just Shift X to change our default colors to, or change from the default colors to a black fill and a white stroke. And now remember, I'm in the regular drawing mode, and it doesn't matter where physically I start to draw. Say I draw in front of these rectangles again, I'm on the layer that's below them, so it's going to show up behind the artwork that, you know, I may have thought I was drawing on top of. And so just keep in mind when you're working with layers, keep in mind which layer you're actually using, and if you don't want to draw behind something, you actually want to draw in front of it, then you're going to have to move your artwork around, make a new layer, do things like that. Now again, you can drag the layer between 2 layers, and that looks like this. It changes to a thin line. So that's dragging between. You can drag above, and that'll be a thin line just above. And you can see the highlight changes when you're on top of, when you're actually going to place it inside of a layer, and I'll show you that here. I'll just drag it inside this layer of ellipses. So when it changes color of the layer itself, the whole color, you don't see that thick line, that whole color right there. So we'll drag it into this one, and you see because it automatically pulled it out or twirled it down, that you can see that that layer is now inside, layer 3 is inside layer 1, and it put it at the very top of that stack. So now I'm in front of the blue rectangle, the yellow, and all of the other ones inside of that. And again, I can twirl this open and drag objects around inside of that order, which meant that I pulled this one from inside the layer 3 to be between the yellow and the green rectangle on layer 1. And then if I drag this one out as well, layer 3 is still there because it's not a group. If it were a group, if the 2 stars were a group, then I pull them out of the group and it removes the group. But when you have a layer or a sub-layer inside of another layer, that layer will remain and it just has no artwork on it. So I'm going to delete that layer. I don't need it anymore. Let's twirl this one closed, and then we'll show you some of the other features of the layers panel. So the next thing we'll talk about is visibility. And visibility is indicated by these little the eyeball kind of symbols over here, and when you hover over that, it says toggles visibility, and command click, or in on a PC it'll be control click. And what that means is outline and display, and I'll show you that. So you can click the entire layer and turn that whole layer invisible, visible, invisible, and so that's a toggle. Or you can select individual paths, for example the black star, the white star, and I can turn those back on. The yellow rectangle, the green rectangle, turn those back on, and so that's the visibility. So if we want to toggle the view mode, again on a Mac, that's command click, and I'll do that, and that changes it to outlines. And outlines again are the basic vector shapes. So this is outline. I can command click again on a Mac. It'll be control click on your PC, and so you can do that on the whole layer, but you can't do it on individual objects. And I've tried, and so for example if you go into isolation mode, I'll double click this blue rectangle here because it's the closest. So I double click that, and I'll even try control click on the icon here. No, it just changes the visibility. So you can only do the change the view mode from outline to display on a layer itself. So I'll double click to get out of isolation mode and click. I will show you again outlines on the top layer, outlines on the bottom layer, and bring that right back. Okay, so that's outline. The other thing that you may do is to lock an object, and you'll see if I click the lock on the layer, everything underneath it, everything within that layer becomes locked. I can lock an individual object, or two or three, or you can take each individual object and lock them, and then for example select all, and now everything should be selected, and I can move them except those things that were locked. And that even goes for the objects on the other layer. I didn't have them locked in place, so when I move everything else, if I have it selected, it will move too. Now I can have them selected. If I turn off the visibility and turn the visibility back on, you see that it has dropped that selection, and you can tell that by these are no longer outlined with their red anchor points and lines. So I now only have the blue rectangle, the white star, and the fuchsia rectangle in the back on this layer 1. Those are the only things I have selected, and so I can move them around. If I lock one of them, it drops it from the selection. So now I have everything locked except the red fuchsia rectangle, and now I can drag that wherever I want. And so you can do that individual item or object, path, shape, or you can do it completely, the whole layer. So let's go back, and I want to lock the top layer, and it doesn't matter if I'm on the top layer or not. If I, you see I'm active on the top layer, layer 2 here, and I'm not active, I don't have it, you see that I'm not actively editing. So I'm actively editing the top layer, and if I Control A or Command A, I select everything, and so I start moving around, and you can see that it's moving the bottom layer because it's not locked. So anything you don't want to move around, you better lock that up. Okay, so think of it that way. And then once you do lock or unlock, or once you do lock and then unlock, then nothing is selected on that layer. So more things with the layer. There's this little indicator. It says that it indicates the selected art, and you can click that to select the art. There's this area where you can select everything on the art or on that layer. And let me deselect again to show you that. So I'll click that and it shows you that everything is selected, and that's just this little button here, and you can click anywhere on it. It's this part or this part. And then it also says drag to move appearance, and that just means you can move things around. Okay. Now, in order to change the layer name or the layer attributes, properties, if you want to just change the layer name, go ahead and double click on the name itself. And so I'll say back. So this is my background layer, and this is my foreground layer, and you can even edit a layer name if the layer is locked. That doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. Also, you can change the properties, and in order to change the properties, look, I'll try and select this, and I'll click on it, and it selected nothing because that layer is locked. So anywhere on the layer itself other than the name, double click and it'll bring up your layer options. Another way to get to that, the layer options, another way to get to the layer options is to click this little settings looking thing here and come down to options for, and then it'll be whatever you've named that layer. In my case it says foreground because that's what I've named it. You can change the name here. You can change the color, the selection color, and typically I'll do that if I'm working with something like, for example, this light red really looks similar to this this fuchsia color. So if I have a layer and I have all of my strokes in a similar red color, I'll change it to an opposite, so a complementary color. So with the red I'd go with a bright green, with the yellow I'd go with a blue. You know, just know your colors and pick something that's fairly close to opposite on the color wheel. And so you can go ahead and change those as you'd like, and you can even pick custom colors and just pull something out of the color wheel. You can use the preset colors. You can grab a crayon, this crayon image here, select your. I'm not sure if the PC version has a different color selector. You'll have to take your chances and pick one from there. But they all have pretty good choices for colors. One other thing to think about, not just the artwork that you're working with, what color is the background of your artboard? So you don't really want to have a white or a light gray color as your anchor points and handles and paths, and that's what these color are going to be if you have a white background. So just pick your color accordingly. Again, I'm going to go with this bright green. The other things that you can do are change some of the attributes of your layer. One is template, and when you click template, it'll lock and do some of these other presets, and then it will also give you the option immediately to dim your image to 50%. And why you would want to do that, we talked about a little bit in the vehicle wrap project, because you may want to dim that image so that you can draw your lines on top of it a little easier. So there's that option. Lock is the same as using this lock button here, so I'm going to keep that selected for now. Show is the visibility, so if I turn that off, then you obviously can't see what it looks like, and you also, if you printed it out, it would not print. There are other things. The preview is showing this preview mode here, so let's deselect that. And I'm sorry, not there. It's the opposite of the outline. So if you have it in outline or preview, and again, to get that back is Control or Command click on the eye. Get back into the layer options, you can double click. Print is a fun one, because if you have something, notes that you're keeping back and forth between designers or people that you're working with on the file, and you want to have them show on your screen so that you can make notes or call out things like, hey, this is the wrong color, what you need to use is that, but then it won't show up as you print it, because if you uncheck print and go ahead and try and print that or save it as a PDF with the editing capabilities turned off, then anything that you have will disappear in that PDF file. Anything that you have will not be printed on that layer if you have that print option turned off. Okay, so those are just some basics with the layer options. I'm going to cancel out of that. So you have the preview or outline mode, and again I'll show you that. Outline mode, and I'm holding down Command on a Mac, Control on a PC, and back to preview. You have the lock or unlock. You have your twirl down to see what path objects you have. You have the name, and you can rename that there, and then you can also select if that layer is not locked. So I'll unlock it, click there, and everything becomes selected. Okay, so that's a little bit of the basics with layers. We'll talk a little bit more about some other functionality with layers in just a second. So let's assume I want to move something around from one layer to another, and I don't want to copy or paste. You can do that, for example, well, I'll show you in a little bit, but first let's say I want to move this reddish colored circle here, ellipse, from the foregroundy layer back to the background. So there's an easy way to do that. What you do is you simply select it with the selection tool, and then you'll go to the background layer or whichever layer you want to put it on, and then go to Object, Arrange, Send to Current Layer. And now you see the selection color changed from that green to the blue, and that indicates that it's on the background layer, which has a blue color. I will turn off the foregroundy, this other layer, and you can see that it's right there. It's still on this, it's still visible, so it's on this layer. It put it to the very top, to the topmost point, so it's in front of this blue rectangle. It's in front of the two stars, it's in front of everything else, and that's where it sits. So I could move it back to this other layer, and that's easily done by reversing the same process, making sure that I have the red ellipse selected, Object, Arrange. Oops, I'm still on the background layer, so I need to select the foreground layer, object, arrange, send to current layer, and now it's got the green path and anchor points, so you know that that's there. So the other thing you can do is copying and pasting in the layers. So I will take this, I want to make a copy of this on the other layer, so I'll Command C on my Mac, Control C on your PC, and then I'll just turn off that layer, or I could lock it. I'm just going to turn off the visibility, and then I'll click the background layer, and I can do a couple of things, and I'll show you them as we go. Let's twirl open the order of our paths so that you can see what's going on. And then remember the copying and pasting commands when we were talking about the shortcut keys in the finger dance, pasting in front of and pasting behind. So if I don't have any object selected or any layer selected, or any sublayer or object within a layer, and I just have the layer here and do a Command F or Control F, I will paste it in front. Let me undo that, and that was Command Z, Control Z. I will now just paste, and remember when you just paste, it's Control V or Command V, and that just puts the artwork in the middle of the screen. So it's there, and as you see, it's still on the top because I'm in normal drawing mode. I'll undo that. Let's switch to draw behind, and I'll do the same thing, Command V, and you can't see it on the artboard. You can't see it here. Well, you can see the outline of where the vector is, but then you can see it on the bottom of the stack here of these objects within this layer. So again, remember, if you have nothing selected, it will go to the back of the artboard. If you do the paste behind, or in fact if you're in draw behind and you just do paste, the regular old Control V, Command V, paste. So let's do draw normal. I'm going to delete that because it was still selected. And now let's select the black colored star path, and I'm going to do Control or Command F to paste in front. It's still pasted in front of that path. Why is that? Well, remember, I didn't have that selected, I just had the layer selected. So I'll show you that again, but this time by selecting that artwork, and then do Control F, and now it's directly in front of that star. So remember the little idiosyncrasies or the details when you're pasting something in front of or behind. If you have nothing selected, it's going to go to the front of that layer. If you have nothing selected and you are on a layer behind the one that you want, if you have the layer behind you selected, it'll still go on the layer you have selected but in front of everything else there. If you have a sublayer or an object within a layer and you have that object selected, then it'll either go in front if you paste in front of that object or behind that object on that layer. And we can review these ad nauseum until I'm blue in the face to match my blue shirt right now. But basically it's just remember which one that you need to do pasting in front, and then or pasting behind, and figure out the little details about that you need at that point. I'm sorry that might be a little confusing, but it changes when you're in the draw normal mode or the draw behind mode, or you're pasting in front and something selected, or you're pasting and nothing selected, or you're on a different layer. Just keep track of where you are and where you want to paste something, and that should help you. And again, you can drag these these pieces of artwork around. You can't drag a path onto another path. You see that little icon that says it has the no symbol. You can move them in front of or behind, and you can tell where it is by that little white line that goes between the layers, and you can drag it to a different layer if you'd like. However, that layer, if it's not turned on visible or it's locked, then you won't be able to do that. I'm sorry, if it's not turned on visible, you won't be able to see it, but if it's locked, you won't be able to drag to the layer or from the layer. And now it says it's invisible, so I need to turn it back on. If it's invisible, then I can drag an object into that layer. Come on, there it goes. It's there, but I can't drag away from, because they don't want you to accidentally move something that you can't see, and so you might not be sure that that's what you want to do. Okay. Alright, that is the basics with layers, and next we will talk about merging and combining shapes.